¿Qué es esto?
I love pneumatic tubes. If you ever read articles about old New York, there's a lot of stuff about how the tube system was. There was an inter-building tube system too.
Oh, really?
I don't know how that could possibly work. And the tubes were 16 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
And they would shoot pneumatic messages, like they'd push them between buildings. And none of those tubes are there, and they're thinking about like using them for fiber optics and stuff like that.
So this was actually the art test I took. I had to make this whole scene in a day.
Really? No. Did they pay you for that? 1 day?
Barely.
Wow.
I was so scared.
How much did you get done?
I think almost all the geometry.
Oh. Wow.
In some cases, it used to be an overnight render.
So this was the first scene in the game that we ever actually did with some test assets. So I had, this is when I was proving out, okay, yes, we can do this. It was this hallway scene. We had manning up, running up and down. We had the security cam, kind of camera switching. We had text on the screen. We had animations. We had geolocation of the sound relative to the camera. The typing was down the hallway. And we had manning running up and down. It was a really good test scene, and it kind of came to it at the very last second. Like literally, I was compiling code as people ran in the room because I had a awful bug. But this was sort of like proof that yes, we have all the elements to make this work. This was the first scene ever put together. And Manny, notice in this scene, Manny hardly ever clips behind anything, and that's partially because I didn't have the buffers working yet. But it was good enough that when people saw it, like they were really impressed, and I was kind of surprised because I was like the new guy at LucasArts and was kind of half-assing my way through this, and somehow made everybody really impressed. So I thought, at that point, I thought, okay, we can do this.
So is there a reason that a lot of people who are in administrative positions of power have New York accents? Is that a
Everyone in the jazz era was from New York.
Well, yeah, that's true.
A lot of people don't know that. My writing has changed a lot since this. Like I was really trying to write good dialogue here, which to me at the time meant a lot of like puns and like wordplay. Like this suit is just this deck of cards is a lot like me. It's ragged around the edges, but I've got more suits. And I forget what it is, but it's like everything had to be this kind of like bon mot.
Well, that's kind of Chandler-esque too. I mean, you know.
But I think I ease off on it in Act 2. I think I just start writing or in Year 2. There's a lot more just normal talking, which I think I kind of like a little bit more now. I mean, it's fun to like have a crazy wordplay like that, but you can just kind of trip over yourself a lot too much if you focus on that, I think.
You hear reverb on the steps, and you hear the reverb on his voice, and that was real-time. It's his real-time reverb in a time when we never did that. We always pre-baked the files with reverb, and Jeff really had to fight for, I think it was like 5% of the CPU. But now anything that happens in this garage goes through that reverb. And like to modern game folks, audio people, it's just totally basic, no big deal. But back then it was such a big deal. And he really had to jump through hoops for it, and it's so great.
Mark Hamer, remember animating that Glottis coming out, and he had to put this thing called a lattice on his butt. And he was like, "What are you working on, Mark?" I'm working on the Glottis butt lattice. And he was always like working on the Glottis butt lattice to like morph and squash and stretch his butt as it came out of the door. And so, 3 cheers to Mark Hamer and his Glottis butt lattice. An amazing work, still remembered to this day. I love that mural because it's the 3 ways of traveling in the land of the dead: the car, and the train, and the boat. There's no air travel in the land of the dead. No land of the dead airlines.
I think the camera choices in this game were actually pretty fantastic as well. I don't know who's responsible for that. Was it storyboarded or... Was that you, Pete? Or?
Yeah, probably a little bit. There's a lot of stuff got worked out ahead of time, certainly, and I mean, because you know we didn't necessarily build full 360 3D worlds. I mean, well, except for like the offices and stuff.
I don't know why we chose Robert Frost for the balloon shape either.
Oh, that was genius.
Because it would be hard to make Robert Frost.
Yes, and also because I think the whole implication is that the clown is way beyond his pay grade, and he has disdain for all those around him, and so he makes shapes that his lowly
I never even
audience.
thought
would-
about that being testimony to the skills of the clown. I thought of it as being Manny being a smartass. Because he asked for it. He's like, oh yeah? Can you do Robert
Well-
Frost? And then, of course, the clown does it.
But see that's a Chandler thing too, because the detective is always smarter than sort of the world that he's in. So he's teasing the clown.
So to speak.
Yeah, so to speak. Because he knows the clown knows what Robert Frost looks like.
Elevator code.
Yeah.
Elevator code's the worst, man. Door code in general. Oh, there goes Dom.
So there was a door box that you would draw on the ground that
Yeah.
would have data attached to it that would trigger the art and the.
Well, it's like the old like when you walk into a supermarket in the old days, they didn't have like a IR thing that was pointing at you. They had like a pad on the ground.
Yeah.
You would roll your cart or step on the pad on the ground, and it would automatically open the grocery store for you. And it's just like that. Like there's a little invisible box that you cross that triggers all that stuff.
And then all the fiddly bits of people step on the box, step off the box, step back on it while the
Yeah.
doors are opening and closing, and
Yeah.
those doors are broken for a long time.
Can you imagine actually pulling yourself up a little chain of ties that are as long as the, like,
Well, that's what's great about. And then I like the
just
view
like-
down.
he's so calm about it too. He's like, jip, 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 many stories. I mean, part of it is, I guess, he probably won't die. if
He's
he
already
falls.
dead.
He's
I
already
was going to
dead.
say he's already dead. So it's really just.
And I was thinking, does he have the muscles to do that? Whereas, no, he doesn't have any muscles. He's just a
No.
living skeleton. How is he moving? He's magic.
His
It's
spirit
soul. It's
is
a soul.
animating. Yes, I always liked the music up on the ledge.
Me too. It's
because
very Bernard Herrmann.
and it made
Vertigo.
always made me feel like a little. Maybe it's because I actually have
Vertigo?
a little bit of vertigo or whatever you said. No, vertigo's
But that
not the
isn't
thing.
that
but yeah.
that happens a lot in
Fear
Vertigo, the
fights.
movie Vertigo, like the
Yes.
na, 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 na,
Yeah,
na, na,
yeah.
na, na.
Yeah, it probably comes from that.
Like that dreamy falling sensation.
Well, I'm a huge Bernard Herrmann fan. How can you not be? He's really he was the guy who really brought kind of a seriousness of classical music to scoring. I mean, the guys before me, there were great composers before him. They were a little more sort of kind of the entertaining aspect of orchestral music.
The ties, when Manny later uses the ties to cross over to the roof, he wanted to be more like a little bit more, less adventure game and more sort of skill game, where you had to kind of, line up the ties and throw the lasso and hook it on the thing. And I'll be honest with you, that was technically not something I was prepared to do in any way, shape, or form. It was kind of all I could do to make the rest of the stuff work. So the ties and the beavers were, and actually the shocks on the tree were all supposed to be a little bit more dynamic than a lot of the canned stuff you typically have in an adventure game. We just couldn't do it.
In the Land of the Living, the people look horrifying because of that. Have you ever seen that optical illusion where you take a picture of someone from a magazine, you cut rectangles out of their eyes and their mouth, and then you turn them upside down, and they just look like demons?
Oh yeah, totally.
That's Land of the Living.
Yeah.
What is this crazy music? How did you get it all warp sounding?
Well, that's a great. See, remember that I used to, when I did all the themes for Grim, I carried around a little handheld cassette, right? So I'd go for my hike in the hills in the morning, and I'd carry my little cassette with me, and if something popped in my head, I'd hum into it.
And it drops into a puddle?
Well, those cassettes, I don't know if you remember much about cassette technology, because,
I remember cassettes.
You do?
I made some mixtapes.
They didn't always last, especially the little tiny ones didn't last for a super long time. So, if you used it all the time, which I did to compose, the machine would, the mechanism would start to wear out, especially if it ran out low on batteries. So yeah, that was me sitting at the piano working on that theme for the Land of the Living, which I recorded on the little handheld cassette and then played it back with batteries that were running out and recorded
Super
that
neat.
into the digital system for
And
the
so
game.
that's awesome. Was that an accident at first? Or you just ran out of power at an earlier time writing something else?
I can't remember. I think it was an accident, but I kind of meant to do it.
How is he sweating without skin? So inaccurate. Try to get it really accurate with the punching. Left, left, right, right, left, left, right. I think that's how you do it.
Oh,
Well, you don't just do 1 2 1 2 with a speed bog.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it looks better.
In my boxing history.
My grandpa used to have a boxing bag in his basement. He showed me how it worked once.
So there's a scene here. So there's the wine bottle there on the side, or sorry, the bourbon bottle, and there's the taking a slug of his booze, and that was actually like we had lots of math problems early in the game where we were lining up camera angles, like you mentioned, and these camera angles, if we had it off between the real time and the pre-render stuff, things got kind of messy, and so that was one of the first scenes we had where Manny as one character goes and interacts with another item in the scene, and it also has to be placed very precisely in the scene because it has to appear to be on the shelf. And it was really difficult to coordinate. He has to walk to exactly the right spot, line up to perform his animation. The cup has its own animation of flying through the air to his mouth. There's all these weird ways we handled it. I think we changed that later to handle it better so that the cup was actually attached to him. We'd swap it in, but blank out the one that was on the shelf, put in the one that was in his hand. Like a magic trick, but originally that was something we used to test it out and make it work, and I remember spending days on that and just being worried like, oh man, we're never going to get this to align perfectly between 2D and 3D.
Yeah, I remember something about the mural. This would be the mural in what's that guy's name? The Nemesis office.
Domino?
Domino. The mural on the ceiling of Domino's office is there was something, I think maybe that angle wasn't planned or something in the game, and then whoever did the textures for that room put this crazy mural on there, and so it was like, oh, we have to show the mural. We have to get that up there. I remember there was some sort of fiasco around that mural.
Usually it's the other way around. Yeah. Usually artists put a bunch of beautiful work into something, and then someone turns the camera the other way and doesn't show it.
Right, exactly. Down in QA, we got on the project way earlier than we ever had on any other project, and we would play the game with the concept art on the screen. But Manny was modeled and done and lit. Or, well, maybe he wasn't lit, I don't know, but he would zoom around the concept art, and it was all black and white. And that's why it was... Oh, that would be neat.
Yeah.
This line that he says a lot actually comes from the old IT guy at LucasArts. We'd say, hey, the server's down. He goes, the server's not down. It's never down. You just can't get to it right now.
The games we make nowadays, we try to keep them real time, and the environments will come in the tens of thousands of polygons probably, but or at least under 100, I would say, at least at the Telltale studio. But here, I think we're almost unlimited, unless it crashed the machines all the time.
Yes, it was unlimited, and it was like trying to render it on your iPhone.
Well, remember,
crazy.
He modeled like every single nut and bolt everywhere. In the
That's what it was.
And they were all high res.
Yeah, I was about to say, a certain amount of this was us not
might get a
knowing, and
close-up.
us not being efficient about where how we set everything up.
As an animator, when you opened one of these environments to animate in, you had to basically throw everything away, except for the one thing that Manny touches or walks next to or something.
This is one of the scenes where we had Tony and Maria Canals in working together, and they're both from Cuba, and they both had worked together before they were cast in Grim. So it was kind of fun to get the two of them together again and play off of each other, which is, of course, the way you'd like to do any game.
You realize how weird it was that he gets locked into a room by his boss, which I don't think is legal. But then again,
back in the 30s, you could do all kinds of stuff. Rubber hoses for cops and so on. I mean, it was just 50 years after the Old West.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's weird to think about.
Yeah.
There's some concept art there in the PowerPoint.
Yeah, because I remember, I just took Peter's stuff and like inverted it to make it look like a plan.
Oh, really? You took someone else's textures and reused them?
Great artist borrow. No, wait. Good artist steal. Yeah.
Oh, the secretary has a dual identity. It's always lots of fun. Always lots of fun with dual identities.
Yeah.
I like that Eva gets to have a little she's got more going on than you thought she did.
I love that too, and I like that there's something fishy in the Department of Death too. That's a good twist.
I used to work at a doctor's office, and one of the jobs that I was doing, just terrible jobs there, and one of them was the roof was covered in like 6 inches of pigeon guano up there. They had a flat roof, like the roof of this building, and And they're like, look, we got to get that stuff off the roof. It's going to break the roof. There's so much pigeon crap on the roof. And I had to go up there with like this flat shovel and cut. It was kind of like cutting brownies out of a pan.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just chopping up the bird poop and just scooping it up and throwing it off the roof. And but in chopping it up, I occasionally find like in sedimentary rock, like an archaeologist or a paleontologist, I would find the bones of a dead pigeon just inside this weird brownie of guano on the roof.
Wow.
So I had my fair share of bad jobs.
So this was really a kind of therapy to get that.
Yeah, man, really, there's not enough
experience.
poop on the roof to make this really.
Well, it's hard to indicate that with the technology of the time. Kind of just like if you did wind in a 8-bit game, it just sounded like and just sounded bad, you know.
At least I got to clear the pigeons from the roof of my memories.
That line right there, love is for the living. I'm only after her for one reason. She's my ticket out of here. That was the key line that Tony and I would always go back to that kind of identified who that character was. The idea with Manny being a Hispanic Humphrey Bogart, that line evoked Casablanca in many ways, and that was kind of just we worked on that line more longer than we should have, but it was just one of those that we just felt was important to kind of nail and help define Manny.
And you could see Pete's musical treatment of it. He kind of suspended the music and had this little classical guitar melody that had a feeling of being like a pocket in time to further highlight that line.
Right.
Yeah.
I always like Glottis because he's just so pure in his. I mean, he's by definition pure in that he's just the spirit of driving, kind of like he was summoned from the land itself, and he has nothing but a desire to drive and go fast, and all his motivations are about like moving at high speed. He almost dies because he's going too slow at some point, and he has to go fast again to come back to life.
Right.
But he also obviously cares about friendship and Manny, and he's a very loyal character.
We coined a phrase called McConnellian ambience, and meaning Pete McConnell. His style of ambience, where you have a little idea and then a completely different idea and then a completely different idea, just sort of sequenced, and the texture would get kind of big, and then it would get very small with a solo clarinet, and then something completely different would happen, and then you'd get a little bassoon. And so these ideas would waft in and out like clouds or just passing notions, and it's a great way to keep the listener entertained but not get in his way. And so we termed that a McConnellian approach to ambience.
This is me playing with my own worst fears. I was realizing while we're making this game, I just randomly was thinking about how nice it is that spiders can't fly. You know, with spiders are kind of icky, but they're on the wall. You can stay away from them. Don't go in the garage. Don't get firewood ever. You can stay away from spiders, but what if they could fly? What if you had to, instead of like a bee buzzing around you or something, you had to worry about like there's a black widow. Like, wouldn't that be creepy? So we made flying spiders in the game. Some of the things that we came up with for this game, like the Petrified Forest. Well, Petrified Forest is right out of a Bogart movie. Right. That's coming from the name of a Bogart movie.
And he's actually a gangster.
Bad guy. He's a bad guy in it, yeah. But having these little things pumping it, I don't know where this came up with. Like, I feel like in games now we try to make things kind of make sense. Like, you go to a gas station, something you know that exists. But here, it's a weird hydraulic pump factory with a counterweight on top of it for sucking something out of the marrow out of these trees.
Oh, right.
But it was all worth it because it was satisfying to see Glottis spin around on the top of it.
I like the environmental message myself.
I remember in this room, as in several others, Julian, we used a sound ambience that we recorded using a contact microphone on various machines, like Coke machines, other vibrating devices or machine-like devices that produces a kind of interesting hum. And if you put your ear up against a Coke machine, or I was just on the Golden Gate Bridge last week and I stuck my ear up against one of those, 300, 200-foot pylons, and it's amazing the resonances that are going on in those type of resonant bodies. And we would record things like that and turn them into ambiences for some of the rooms.
Well, this is the area that Tim and I would make a lot of jokes about because, you know, producer type person, I need to shorten the game, cut it somehow. So this area, I would, you know, say, hey, we need to cut the beavers. Does that make sense?
He's like, no way, not cutting it.
Oh, well, the whole time we'd fight about it, and it was that one kind of thing where that was the story I told a little earlier about the ship, you know, and he said, Leslie, a game is like a ship, and the ship is going, and it's going to keep going until it stops. And I was like, what kind of logic is that? It has to finish at some point. So I was like, look, the beavers got to go, and they'd always be on the list. And he actually drew me a little pictures on a napkin of like the armadillo, the beavers on fire. And he's like, why did you cut me, Leslie? Please don't cut me, Leslie. And he would just poke me.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
This is like a callback to those brave young men and their jaunty jalopies. You ever seen that movie? Because those outrageous young men, their flying machines.
No, that I remember.
There are these two crazy movies from the 60s which were all about, it was kind of like the Wacky Races, but a real-life version. Magnificent.
Yeah. Flying machines.
And it was like one of those movies, it was kind of like Wild, Wild, Wild World or whatever. Like
a Mad
World, where all these people are chasing some crazy prize, but the cars in it always had things like that. I think that is a direct lift. Like one of the cars would have these hydraulic shocks that lifted up, or just crazy extending things.
Right.
I still remember writing a big justification about tank controls when I was pitching this. People were like, "Let's make it so the controls are more like Mario, where you push it." No, point and click. I was thinking. Tank controls I thought were superior to point and click at the time, because when you're pointing and clicking, you're distant from the screen, and the screen is this other thing that you're interacting with at your fingertips.
Right.
But when you're doing tank controls, you feel like you are in the center of the character.
Right.
And the world is rotating. The world's rotating around you, and so when you think, instead of going, I want to go on the left of the screen or I want to go to the right of the screen, you're saying, I want to look at the thing to the left of me and then the thing to the right of me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't know if that was necessarily the right decision, but it's a good piece of evidence that you can sometimes make a really good argument for the wrong decision, and that's something to watch out for in life. You know what I mean? Like you can make a really compelling, and in fact win an argument.
Oh yeah.
And be totally wrong.
Winning an argument has nothing to do with being right. That's for sure.
Exactly. It's just being able to make a good case.
This one was
How could you ever cut this?
I know, but programmatically it was buggy, and it was hard. No one understood like how to solve this puzzle for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, look, you got to pick something, and we hadn't started it yet. And so this is a classic Tim technique. When you want to cut something, he will start putting it in the game.
Yeah.
So that everything gets in. So, yeah. Funny.
This scene actually, this is the beavers here, another good example of like, why you have to have coroutines in games, because at least in adventure games, you have to have like a script that just says, how's this beaver going to behave? What's he going to do? And at the time that people were making games, the scripting languages weren't popular yet. You had a lot of games in C, and somebody would be trying to write in their game engine, in their game loop, and go run the beavers now. And in a scene like this, you had to be able to take that and say, this is how a beaver behaves. Right now, I'm thinking like a beaver. How would a beaver? He's going to crawl over here, and he's going to chew on these things, and then he'll get tired, and then he'll jump over here. The same thing with the pigeons and anything else. And that, again, it's like I didn't have to think about the fact that they were needed. They were obviously needed. I mean, that's one of the things that Scump had made very obvious. Like, you cannot make adventure games without coroutines. They didn't even call them coroutines, though. I mean, we didn't even know what to call them for a long time until,
Threads.
They were just threads, yeah. And actually, that was one of the early experiments. I actually tried to use actual Windows threads, because this is a Windows game. It wasn't a DOS game. This is a Windows game. We can use actual threads. And I initially did try and actually have different Lua threads, and it was just so heavyweight. Machines are so tight, and it was so much overhead, and it was so complex. And it was like, no, we need something lightweight. It needs to be really focused on what the game does.
We were like, what is the flame source for the beavers? And they're like, well, they have a nuclear core. They have a nuclear core, so they're thermonuclear flaming bone beavers.
Yeah, I have to say, flaming bone beavers. I mean,
you would think that would
what
be
does that remind
controversial.
you of? Yeah.
A band name?
Maybe. Yeah.
I really wanted to have this moment of Lasco bonding with Glottis, and that like through the magic of cars and talking about engines and stuff. And cars bring people together, talking about engines.
Well, it's
because I never had sports.
internal combustion.
I never liked sports. I was not into the manly unifier of sports. But
Me neither.
But cars you can talk about with the toughest of dudes.
That's true. That's
Like-
true.
The character Celso is played by a really funny actor called Peter Lorre, and when he came into the studio on the first day, he had this real look of apprehension about him, and it turned out the word in Hollywood was that Grim Fandango was code name for Star Wars Episode 1 casting. So when he was coming in for the project, people were telling him, "You're going to be going in, and George Lucas is going to be there, and they're going to be flying you up to the ranch." And he was terribly disappointed when he walked in, and the only person in the studio was me.
I love the tiling floor. It's my favorite part in this
Yep.
film. And the fact that it's a automat, which was part of a period reference too. Like those ways that there used to be these restaurants in New York where you'd go, or big cities where you'd go in and the food was ready for you behind these little panels, and you would just open the door and take it, which is just an interesting way of serving stuff. Like just separate the server from the eater, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, that is, I never.
Like you don't want to see the wait staff, so they're behind this wall because of some weird social
weird.
reason.
That
I don't
is
know.
weird.
And
I
they
didn't
don't
know
really have
about
automats anymore, but I always thought that's what was behind that.
It does seem a little impersonal, doesn't it?